Hi everyone, today's session is on academic and research skills for law, and it's the assignment guidance. So we've looked at just a summary of what we've done in the last session, so you're able to identify what learning outcomes meet what tasks. So we've done learning outcome 1, which was to be able to assess our own academic competencies. We looked at the issue in regards to our English language skills and setting targets for improvement for self-assessment. We also looked at the purpose of assessment and also to set any sort of targets for self-assessment, why self-assessment is so important, and why we need it in our research project. Then we went on to learning outcome 2, which we looked at knowing how to research information using primary and secondary methods. And we looked at the different types of primary and secondary methods and what would be needed in a research project. We then looked at learning outcome 3, which was able to take effective notes with a variety of sources. We identified the issue in regards to why listening was so important as a skill. We looked at the requirements for listening skills. We also looked at active listening skills. We looked at summarizing questions and paraphrasing things. We also looked at notes, footnotes, referencing and things like that. We then went on to learning outcome 4, which was to be able to draft a piece of research. And we looked at areas in regards to choosing a research paper, so anything to do with law in regards to domestic violence, abuse of criminal law, sentencing guidelines, anything like that, where you generate an idea and identify. We looked at the structure, so you'd identify a piece of research, and also looked at aims and objectives, and also identified research topics. We then went on to learning outcome 5, which looking at what recommendations were, also identifying what an implementation plan was, and looking at how we would do a draft copy of our research and submit it to a supervisor to give us feedback on any sort of improvements. We then went on to learning outcome 6, which was we looked at Kolb's framework and learning styles in regards to what individuals would use, and also looked at why there's a need to have an action plan in place. So when the feedback comes back from the supervisor in regards to your research paper, we identified why there was a need to have a research action plans in place. Now we're going to go on to the assignment guidance. So learning outcomes: be able to assess our academic competence, know how to research information using primary and secondary methods, and be able to take effective notes from a variety of sources, be able to plan and draft a piece of research, and be able to produce academic work. We looked at being able to reflect on our academic progress as well. So first one, being able to assess our own academic competence. So here you would assess your own academic strengths and weaknesses, including academic English language skills. You would prepare a brief note assessing your academic strengths and weaknesses, including English language. So here you would look at the SWOT analysis and identify what your academic strengths and weaknesses are. You would briefly explain what is the purpose of assessment and the role of a student. So why is assessment needed and what is the main purpose of assessment? You would list out different personal skills with a brief note, maximum 50 words, things like the importance of time management, responding to change, etc., and carry out a personal SWOT analysis. And the word count for this part of it would be 350 to 450 words. You would then set targets for improving using the self-assessment. So you would briefly explain what is self-assessment, demonstrate your understanding towards creating long-term and short-term goals, and list out the long-term and short-term goals in a table format, and identifying what your long-term goals are and what your short-term goals are. You'd prepare a SMART goals related to your current academics, your career aspirations, and you would look at reporting the results of the test from the Council of Europe, which we went through in the previous learning outcomes. And the word count for this section would be 350 to 450 words. So to develop a plan to show how targets will be achieved. So here you would look at the for a merit criteria. So this is if you want to gain a merit criteria, you would need to detail out the SMART goals. So you would look at use realistic targets. You would identify resources to achieve your goals. So what kind of resources will you be using, okay, to identify what your goals are? So you need to look at what kind of resources you will be using, and you will be discussing the frequency of the review. So you would be looking at the SMART acronym, which is a specific, measurable, achievable, and time-bound. And you would look at that to plan your steps to meet long-term goals, and you will also identify any sort of issues that you want in regards to short-term and long-term goals, and you would look at the SMART goals in regards to that, and that is to achieve a merit criteria, and that word count for this section is 450 to 550 words. So the next one is know how to research information using primary and secondary methods. So here you would outline the process for carrying out primary and secondary research from different sources, okay? Here you would discuss how primary data is collected and the importance of this. You'd look at explaining what primary data is and having a look at how it is collected. And you would look at the fact that it's collected for research purposes. You would focus on things like the sources of, explain the different sources of primary data, which are interviews, focus groups, discussions, surveys, any examples you can give and identify why they are so important. And then discuss best practices of using primary data. So here you would look at some advantages and disadvantages of primary data. Like for advantages, you could look at data interpretation is better, greater control of data, updated data, and any sort of disadvantages, time consuming and costly, requires experience to create questions. So these would identify the issues around completing this task on primary research. Then you would outline the process for carrying out secondary research from different sources, and you would look at how secondary data is collected, okay, and the importance of this. So you would look at how secondary data is things like, you know, can be qualitative and quantitative data, books, journals, annual reports, trade reports, and then you would look at looking at the different sources of the secondary data, trade reports, as I mentioned, annual reports, journals, statistical websites, and then look at the best practices of using secondary data. Again, you would look at the advantages and disadvantages of secondary data, things like if the advantages are it's less time consuming, many sources to choose from. So there's a variety of different sources, and that's an advantage. Low resource requirements, and some of the disadvantages is maybe outdated, and there's no control over the quality of data, and the format may be difficult to analyze. And you would look at that in regards to the best practice of using secondary data, advantages and disadvantages. And the word count for this area would be 350 to 450 words. To analyze with example what constitutes good practice in primary and secondary research, you will, for a distinction criteria, you would have to look at evaluating the different sources of primary and secondary data, okay? And you would look at analysing at least 3 sources of primary data. List out advantages and disadvantages of them 3 data sources, and provide examples for each as appropriate. So you need to identify any sort of examples in regards to any of the 3 sources for primary data, and this is to get this is the extension activity to get a distinction for criteria 1. Then you would have to look at evaluating the different sources of secondary data, and you would analyze at least again 3 sources, list out advantages and disadvantages, and provide examples of each that are appropriate. So you would need to look at the different advantages and disadvantages of that in regards to, you know, giving examples, okay, for each of the 3 sources. The next one is be able to take effective notes from a variety of sources. Here, they note key points of information from a variety of sources using active listening skills and reading strategies. So here you need to demonstrate the ability of active listening skills. So you need to summarize a piece of work in a newspaper article in approximately 200 words, okay? And you would be listing out key questions which you have in the article. You would also demonstrate ability to take notes, so illustrate note-taking ability by preparing notes from a magazine article, and please state the source of the article, and that would be a word count for this, 350 to 450 words. Paraphrasing and summarizing, so you would read the following articles, which is bbc.com work-life article, which is a link is just there. Summarize the article and paraphrase the key concepts of this article. You need to identify the main theme and list out the key points. So let's just see if we can open that article. So the article that you need to look at in regards to that task is why arrogance is dangerously contagious. And this is an article below that identifies overconfidence can delude us into dangerous thought or actions, and the same arrogance can also spread to others like wildfire. So you need to read this article, and it looks at meta-analysis of the studies, and it identifies elements of the article that will help you towards completing this task. So this is the article, and it's on bbc.com work life, and this will be available to you with the link. So I've just shown the article to you on bbc.com work life article, which you need to look at in regard to why arrogance is dangerously contagious. You need to summarize the article. You need to paraphrase the key concepts of the article. And we went through paraphrasing in learning outcome 3. So you need to be referring to that. You need to identify the main theme and list out the key points for that article. And its word count for this is section 350 to 400 words, and the link is there for the article. Appropriately reference your sources using our scholar referencing system. And this is for a merit criteria. So this is if you want to gain a merit criteria. Your entire assignment will be evaluated on whether referencing is properly done using the scholar referencing system. So you need to gain the merit criteria, you need to be using the scholar referencing system, which was identified in Learning Outcome 3 and which looked at what scholar referencing actually meant and how it needs to be done. And it's the Oxford University Standard for Citation of Legal Authorities and what you need to do when you are referencing. So this must be done throughout your assignment to identify that you have completed the merit criteria. The next one is to be able to plan and draft a piece of research. Create a plan for research on a chosen topic area in law. Identify research topic in the field of law. So we did give you some ideas in regards to research topic areas, things like, maybe domestic violence, maybe forced marriages, maybe the criminal justice system, identifying if there's any sort of sentencing issues and the impact of legislation on businesses, the right of shareholders in minority takeover. So there are a wide range of examples for you to look at in regarding to choose a topic area in law. So you need to identify research topic in the field of law. You need to list out the aims and objectives, as we went through in Learning Outcome 4. You need to identify sampling technique and the size of the sample. For example, are you going to use qualitative data? Are you going to use quantitative data? If you're going to use surveys, interviews, and also identify the method for data collection. Again, surveys, interviews, what you intend to do and what you intend to identify from this research. Draft a piece of work using appropriate referencing techniques. So here, you will, for the chosen topic, use the following structure. As we mentioned, again, in Learning Outcome 5, be able to produce academic work. So you'd look at an introduction, which would be chapter 1. Chapter 2 would be identifying a literature review. Chapter 3 would be looking at research methodology. Chapter 4 would be looking at data collection analysis and identifying what you will be using. So your findings, academic reviews, and chapter 5 would be a summary of your conclusion. So any recommendations based on your finding, any sort of limitations, and then also referencing. And that's 350 to 400 words in total. Use own review and feedback from tutor to improve draft work. For a merit criteria, you need to ensure that you get feedback from your supervisor. So once you've submitted your draft work, you need to get feedback from your supervisor for all the chapters and make changes as per feedback. Show evidence of your improvement. So for the merit criteria, you need to show that you have completed all the feedback from your supervisor and made the changes as your supervisor has advised you to. And you need to show evidence of the improvements, and that is for a merit criteria. Be able to produce an academic work. Here you need to produce an academic work at a professional standard using the existing draft. So what you've been given back by your supervisor, you need to be able to identify what you need to do and all the changes, and then produce a professional piece of work to identify that you've done that, and also you've made all the changes to improve that in a professional manner. So you need to use the structure as provided in the previous slides, chapter 1 to 5. You need to provide referencing wherever applicable, so that a scholar referencing. You need to use heading and subheading with font size 12, Arial or Calibri, and 1.5 line spacing. And this is to show that it is a professional piece of work, okay? And this is where you will get your marks for this part of it. The total word count of your entire assignment is 3,500 to 4,000 words maximum. Present academic work orally at professional standard to an audience. For the merit criteria, you need to speak to your learning institution, which is UK Varsity in this case, and you need to ask if it's possible for you to present the academic work to a professional audience. This will be an assessment of your English and oral skills. And for this, you use PowerPoint presentation to present your work. So you need to identify everything in a PowerPoint slide, so you're able to identify your work and your English and oral skills, and use PowerPoint presentation to present your work to the professional audience. And you need to speak to UK Varsity for that. Present academic work at a professional standard to an audience and discuss the content of your work. For a distinction criteria, extending on the merit criteria, you need to discuss the content of the work. So once you have produced the work to the audience, you need to discuss that with the audience and the content of the work, why you've done the work, why the work's so important, why it is the area you've done, and why you have made these amendments and things like that. This will involve taking questions from your audience and explaining your approach. It's important that you are able to explain your approach when you are asked questions. For example, why you chose that type of methodology, why you chose that type of data collection. So whether you chose a survey, or whether you chose an interview, why you chose that, you need to identify. You need to know your area inside out, so you're able to get yourself involved in the questions that are asked by the audience, and you are able to answer them questions, because it's so important you're able to identify that you know your area inside out. Be able to reflect on academic progress. So reflect on your own academic progress, including development of academic skills and academic English language skills. So here you need to reflect on our academic progress, including academic skills and English language. So here you will use the model of Kolb's learning cycle to relate to your work. So when we use Kolb's learning cycle in regards to our work, we identified the importance of Kolb's learning cycle and the learning styles as well. And we looked at Kolb's learning styles in regards to, identifying the elements of the cycle. So there was concrete experience, doing and having an experience, reflective observation, reviewing, reflecting on the experience, abstract conceptualization, concluding, learning from the experience, and active experimentation, planning, trying out what you have learned. So this needs to be done in regards to this part of the assessment. Your reflection on learning should include the following. What have you learned? What are the areas of improvement? And how did you connect with your supervisor? So if you had contact with your supervisor, how did it go? Whether there were discrepancies or whether you connected well with your supervisor and you took on board the feedback given to you. Total word count of this section, approximately 350 to 450 words. Develop an action plan for further improvements. For this section, compulsorily include the action plan for further improvement. This should consist of, so you need an action plan to identify any sort of further improvements. What do I need to learn, and why? What will I do to achieve this? And this was the diagram on learning outcome 6 that we looked at. What resources or support will I need? Is there any sort of extra support you need? Any sort of resources you need? What will my success criteria be? How have I implemented my learning, and what impact has this had at work, outside of work? Your target dates for review and completion. And that is really important that you identify any sort of target dates for review and completion. And again, all this needs to be presented, the above information, the action plan and further improvements needs to be presented in a tabular form, okay, to identify each area and how you intend to consider each area and the action points. Provide academic feedback to peers for merit criteria. Speak to your learning institution, which is UK Varsity in this case, and ask if it's possible to provide academic feedback to your peers. This should be under supervision of the institution and approved by them. Present the feedback based on your learnings in a clear and concise manner. General guidelines. Useful tips. Read the tasks carefully, focus on the details, what you are being asked. Identify and answer only what you are being asked, nothing extra. Command words. Explain, define, describe, 70 to 100 words. Assess, examine, clarify, analyze, 100 to 125 words. Compare, contrast, critically analyze, 150 to 200 words. Harvard referencing. So referencing need to be Harvard. Author, date, style. For example, Johnson and Woods 2011 in the main text, and then full citation in the reference. Keep a check on the word count because it's so important you keep that check. Merit distinction. Make sure there is sufficient evidence of critical analysis. Critique the argument supported by academic literature. Ensure that you include relevant theoretical models and examples, and use peer-reviewed journals for supporting or critique of the topic at hand. At least 20 high-quality journal references, and avoid low-quality sources such as blogs. Make sure you follow the criteria to gain your marks, but make sure you follow the UK Varsity criteria to do a good academic piece of work. Assignment declaration, and this needs to be done once you have done the assignment, and the declaration needs to be done saying that the assignment, I confirm this assignment is my own work and that I've read and understood the college's guidance on regards of plagiarism. So make sure you are checking all your works of plagiarism and referencing all your sources. Preliminary, refer to ebooks and journals on the Moodle for this unit. Further reading, libraryguides.body.co.uk, Bailey, Info, Law, newsletter. Submission of the assignment must be done at learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. An assignment submission is after 2 weeks of completion of the unit and its delivery. And referencing is the Harvard Reference System, ARS 2021. Bibliography, academic and research skills, learning outcomes, slide number 2 to 10, UK Varsity. If you have any questions, there is a link there to the email address, raman@ukvarsity.co.uk. But submission of the work is learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. So please make sure you follow all the guidance and the support given to complete this assignment. Thank you. That's all for today. All the best. Assignment deadline 2 weeks from today. And thank you for attending the session, and thank you for your patience. Thank you.